Those individuals allegedly included high-ranking supervisors in the business, personal assistants, security staff, and household staff.
Not do this alone. Do you foresee that there could be other charges related to this case?
I'm not taking anything off the table.
No one wants him mentioned.
The courtroom air was stifling, even for Los Angeles. The kind of thick tension that makes you feel like you're inhaling other people's anxiety. Reporters lined the walls, pens poised, faces taut with anticipation. Then came the moment no one could have scripted. Christian Combs, better known to the world as King, stood up, pale as a ghost, and left. Not in the slow, calculated way you'd expect from someone coached by a team of high-powered attorneys. No, this was raw, a man unraveling. He didn't glance back at his legal team, didn't nod at the judge, he just stormed out, leaving the courtroom buzzing and his reputation trailing behind him like smoke from a fire he couldn't put out.
In her civil lawsuit, Cassie said that she was the victim of abuse, assault, and at the hands of Diddy.
The spark? Well, that's where things got dark. His own defense attorney, the one person paid handsomely to keep things controlled, had just uttered the kind of allegations that don't just stain a name, they obliterate it. Words like underage and private gatherings hung in the air like a bad echo. And then there was that term freakoffs, a word that didn't belong in a courtroom but now seemed to define the entire proceeding, the sort of language that makes everyone shift in their seats, unsure whether to look at the floor or the person next to them. It wasn't just the shock of the claim, it was the weight of what it implied. This wasn't another story of a privileged kid getting too wild at a party. This was something else entirely. Christian's walkout wasn't just dramatic, it was tactical damage control in real time, because the moment those accusations surfaced, the narrative shifted. It wasn't about whether he could prove he wasn't guilty. It was about whether his name could ever recover. Allegations of impropriety at yacht gatherings with questionable attendees? That's not just fodder for tabloid headlines. It's the kind of thing that sticks, whether it's true or not. And for a guy trying to carve out a career of his own, away from the towering shadow of his father, Sean Diddy Combs, this was more than a scandal. It was a full-blown crisis.
A U.S. judge has ruled that the rapper and producer Sean Diddy Combs will stand trial on federal trafficking and racketeering charges in May. He'll be held in prison until then. Sean Combs has pleaded not guilty to charges that he used his business empire to transport women and male workers across state lines to take part in recorded performances. If convicted, he could face a life sentence.
The details, as laid out by the accuser's legal team, felt ripped from the pages of a sensationalist novel. Grace O'Marquet, a former yacht stewardess, painted a picture of chaos masquerading as luxury. Hired under the guise of serving dinner and drinks for what was sold as a family excursion, she claimed to have walked into something far removed from the polished image the Combs name projected, rotating guests, questionable beverages, and a vibe that was more nightclub than nautical retreat. And in the center of it all, Christian, allegedly the life of the party in ways that no one wanted to discuss openly. The accusations against him were laser-focused, unwanted advances, pressure to indulge, and an atmosphere of excess that left no room for boundaries. But it wasn't just her story that turned heads, it was the so-called evidence. Transcripts of audio recordings, bruises photographed and attached to court filings, and claims of spiked drinks. Grace's lawyers weren't just building a case, they were constructing a spectacle. And the piece de resistance? Allegations that Christian wasn't just a participant, but a repeat offender, someone who had been present at other gatherings of similar questionable nature. The defense, of course, fired back, calling the claims baseless and manufactured. But in the court of public opinion, the damage was already done.
Hey, real quickly, all that commissary stuff, he's not getting any of that because people in the shoe have an abbreviated list. So he's out of luck. No stake for him. Yeah, he is on watch. This guy thought he would have went home. All of a sudden, he didn't get bond. Remember, the first night that he was there.
And then there's the father, Diddy, the man who built an empire, a mogul whose name is synonymous with power, wealth, and influence. He wasn't just a bystander in this story. Grace's lawsuit had his name all over it, citing him as the one who chartered the yacht, controlled the environment, and allegedly fostered the kind of atmosphere where such allegations could arise. It wasn't just Christian's reputation on the line, it was the family dynasty. The Combs name, once a badge of honor in the music and entertainment world, now seemed like a lightning rod for scandal. As the courtroom drama unfolded, whispers began circulating about other potential lawsuits, other potential victims. Was this an isolated incident, or was it the tip of an iceberg? Grace's attorney, Tyrone Blackburn, seemed to think it was the latter. He hinted at more recordings, more witnesses, and a pattern of behavior that went beyond one unfortunate night on a yacht. And while Christian's legal team scrambled to discredit the claims, the media latched onto every word, every detail, every insinuation.
Now, to the latest on the arrest of Sean Diddy Combs. This one has so many people talking. The disgraced music mogul facing federal racketeering, conspiracy, and trafficking charges. Both the prosecution and defense teams are set to discuss the next phase of action following the indictment, as investigators work to determine potential co-conspirators. But how exactly did we get here?
The fallout was immediate. Social media lit up with hashtags, fan debates, and armchair legal analyses. Some defended Christian, citing the presumption of innocence and the dangers of trial by public opinion. Others weren't so forgiving, pointing to past controversies and the broader narrative of privilege shielding bad behavior. Christian's carefully curated image, the young rapper, the aspiring entrepreneur, the heir to an entertainment empire, was now in shreds. And while he remained silent, his posts became a battlefield. Comments ranged from support to outright condemnation, with the occasional plea for him to come clean. But silence, as they say, speaks volumes. Christian's refusal to address the allegations head-on only fueled speculation. Was he waiting for his day in court, or was he hiding behind his attorney's carefully worded statements? Either way, the narrative was slipping out of his hands. And as for Diddy, the man who once seemed untouchable was now grappling with headlines that linked his name not just to his son's scandal, but to his own alleged misdeeds. The family's united front, their Instagram posts, their public appearances now felt like a house of cards, one gust away from collapse.
This is very significant, just from who we associate Diddy being and everything we've seen him do over the decades. Like you said, this is quite the downfall to go from, we saw the mansions back in March that were raided by the feds. So to go from living in those mansions to being in a jail cell right now, I think it really underscores the magnitude of what he's facing and the weight of the federal government.
Of course, none of this was happening in a vacuum. The entertainment industry has a long history of sweeping things under the rug, of protecting its own. But the tide has shifted in recent years. Allegations that might have been dismissed or quietly settled a decade ago now have the power to topple careers, dismantle legacies, and spark broader conversations about accountability. And the Combs family, for all their influence, found themselves at the center of a storm they couldn't control. What makes this story even more compelling or disturbing, depending on how you look at it, is the sheer scale of what's at stake. This isn't just about one lawsuit or one courtroom drama. It's about a family empire, a legacy built on music, fashion, and branding, now teetering on the edge. Every new detail, every leaked recording, every whispered rumor adds another layer to an already tangled web. And while Christian's courtroom exit might have been an attempt to take back some semblance of control, it only added fuel to the fire.
Live, a judge has denied bail for Sean Diddy Combs. Of course, this was the hip-hop mogul's latest bid for freedom as he remains in federal jail for his racketeering and trafficking case.
Because here's the thing about scandals. They don't exist in isolation. They spread, they connect, they reveal things that people would rather keep hidden. And when it comes to the Combs family, the question isn't just about what happened on that yacht. It's about what lies beneath the surface. The secrets, the alliances, the history that brought them to this point. And as the world watches, one thing becomes clear. This story is far from over. And just when you thought the story couldn't spiral any further, the focus shifts to the man at the center of it all, Sean Diddy Combs. If Christian's courtroom walkout was the spark, Diddy's shadow looms over this entire scandal like a thundercloud ready to burst. For decades, he was untouchable, a titan of the music industry, a cultural icon who turned every move into gold. But now, the empire he built is being picked apart brick by brick, exposing cracks that have been there all along. Cracks that he worked hard to plaster over with charm, wealth, and relentless reinvention.
Both sides in the Sean Diddy Combs case have until today to give answers for how the music mogul has been communicating from jail. Combs appearing in court last Friday seeking bail while he awaits trial. He's been held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn since September.
Diddy wasn't just a man with power. He was a man who defined power in his world. His rise to fame was nothing short of meteoric. Bad Boy Records wasn't just a label, it was a movement, and Diddy was its unshakable king. But behind the glitz, the yachts, the chart-topping hits, there was another story, a darker one that people whispered about, but never dared to say out loud. The kind of story that's now coming to light, layer by shocking layer, as investigators dig into his past and his business dealings. And if you thought Christian's allegations were grim, Wait until you see the allegations surrounding Diddy himself. Here's the thing. Diddy didn't just cultivate an image. He built an empire that blurred the lines between business, entertainment, and influence. But that empire, as it turns out, may have been built on more than just talent and hustle. The deeper you dig into his history, the more you find yourself asking, how much of his success came at the expense of others? Because according to prosecutors, Diddy wasn't just a passive observer in any of this. He was the architect, the mastermind, the man pulling the strings behind the scenes. And his influence wasn't limited to music. It extended into some seriously questionable territory.
It's a question of that, but when you read through the indictment, it's pretty clear who could be indicted as a co-conspirator. Right now, there are people in the indictment who would be considered unnamed co-conspirators, but clearly have played a role in this conspiracy. And I think prosecutors have some big leverage on them because they're hoping that they testify against Diddy as prosecution witnesses.
Take, for instance, the so-called gatherings that have now become infamous in court filings and testimonies. These weren't casual parties or networking events. They were meticulously planned affairs, complete with guest lists, logistics teams, and, allegedly, an unspoken understanding of what was expected from attendees. What's even more disturbing is the suggestion that this wasn't a one-off or even an occasional indulgence. No. These gatherings were reportedly a recurring fixture in Diddy's world, a well-oiled machine designed to entertain the elite while keeping the details out of the public eye. Until now. The whispers about Diddy's alleged role in Shakur's assassination have resurfaced, with a vengeance, fueled by the timing of the recent raids and mounting lawsuits. It's a theory that's lurked in the shadows of hip-hop lore for decades, but now, with federal investigators reportedly uncovering connections between Diddy's empire and long-standing criminal enterprises, those rumors feel less like conspiracy theories and more like a thread worth pulling. The story goes like this. Diddy, at the height of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry, allegedly put a bounty on Shakur's head as part of a twisted game of power and retaliation. And while no one has ever been formally charged for ordering the hit, people close to the case have long pointed fingers at him, claiming his influence reached far beyond boardrooms and recording studios.
I'm not surprised with the decision. I'm surprised that Judge Subramanian entertained it. He held a 2-hour hearing, which we were covering live, and he issued a 5-page written order. Most other judges, including the 2 previous judges, to consider this issue, summarily denied the bail motion. I think a lot of it stems from Judge Subramanian being a newer judge. This is a Biden appointee.
The 1996 shooting of Shakur on the Las Vegas Strip wasn't just a tragedy. It was a seismic event that shook the music industry to its core. But what's often overlooked is how methodical the hit appeared to be. Witnesses have described the scene as something out of a mob movie, a Cadillac pulling up alongside Shakur's car, a flurry of gunfire, and a clean getaway. For years, investigators struggled to pin down the mastermind, but the name Diddy has been whispered behind closed doors more times than anyone wants to admit. And now, with Dwayne Keefe D. Davis finally facing charges for his alleged role in the crime, the noose may be tightening around those who allegedly orchestrated the entire thing. Davis himself has claimed that Diddy offered him an astronomical sum to take care of Shakur, a claim that has never been definitively disproven. What makes this theory even harder to ignore is the sheer number of people who've corroborated parts of it over the years. Former insiders, bodyguards, and even rival executives have hinted at a culture of calculated aggression within Diddy's circle, where enemies weren't just outmaneuvered, they were eliminated. To be clear, Diddy has consistently denied any involvement in Shakur's assassination, dismissing the allegations as baseless and defamatory. But with investigators now reportedly scrutinizing his finances, past associates, and business dealings, the question of what he knew and what role he may have played is impossible to ignore. And let's not forget, Shakur's assassination isn't the only unsolved crime tied to this rivalry. Biggie Smalls, Diddy's protege and closest ally, was gunned down just 6 months later in a strikingly similar fashion. If Shakur's assassination was retaliation, who gave the green light for Biggie's assassination? The timing, the connections, the mounting evidence. It's all too convenient to dismiss as coincidence.
Is illustrating is this completely out of control party on a super yacht, including various celebrities, that when you read it, it kind of rings true. I mean, when you read it, it doesn't come off as being something that's completely unbelievable. You have to take into consideration that
for Diddy, the implications are devastating. If even a fraction of these allegations hold water, it casts his entire career in a new light. A career that has been as much about building an image as it has been about building an empire. The idea that one of the most celebrated figures in music history could have played a role, even indirectly, in one of hip-hop's darkest chapters is almost too much to process. But that's the thing about power. It doesn't just create opportunities, it creates enemies. And in Diddy's case, those enemies are now lining up to tell their stories, piece by piece, in courtrooms and interviews. Whether it's a disgruntled former employee or a federal investigator with a warrant, the walls are closing in. And the deeper you dig into his past, the murkier and more troubling the narrative becomes. But here's where it gets even murkier. Diddy's name isn't just being tied to allegations of misconduct at these events, it's also being linked to accusations of a systematic effort to cover them up. Witnesses have alleged that employees were paid off, evidence was destroyed, and anyone who dared to speak out was silenced, either through intimidation or generous payouts. And let's not forget the role of his inner circle. Diddy wasn't operating in isolation. He had a network of people, assistants, managers, enablers, who allegedly helped him maintain control, ensuring that his public image remained pristine while the reality was anything but.
But there's also strategic reasons for the prosecutors to want him to have co-defendants, because right now he hasn't waived his right to a speedy trial, which would force prosecutors to take up the trial pretty quick, which they actually might not be ready to do. But if they supersede him and have co-defendants with him, it makes it a lot easier to pursue a trial continuance without him waiving his speedy trial right.
And then there's the matter of the federal investigation. This isn't just a tabloid story anymore, it's a criminal case with real consequences. When federal agents raided Diddy's properties, they weren't just looking for financial records or contracts, they were looking for something much more damning. And according to reports, what they found was enough to send shockwaves through his entire operation. Electronics, documents, and other materials were seized, painting a picture of a man whose empire may have been as corrupt as it was successful. And while Diddy's attorneys have been quick to dismiss the findings as circumstantial or irrelevant, the sheer volume of evidence suggests otherwise. What's particularly striking is how this scandal is reshaping the narrative around Diddy. For years, he was celebrated as a self-made mogul, a man who rose from humble beginnings to become one of the most powerful figures in entertainment. But now, that narrative is being challenged in ways that are impossible to ignore. Was his success really the result of hard work and talent? Or was it built on a foundation of exploitation and manipulation? And if the latter is true, how many people were complicit in keeping that truth hidden?
Separated from the general population, right? He's with, or was with Sam Bankman-Fried at least. And the irony there is that's someone who was granted bail, tried to tamper with witnesses, so the judge revoked his bail. So that just goes to show how these federal judges feel about witness tampering before trial.
The ripple effects of this scandal are already being felt across the industry. Diddy's name, once synonymous with success and innovation, is now being whispered in the same breath as words like control and conspiracy. And it's not just his reputation that's at stake, it's the entire legacy he spent decades building. From his ventures in fashion and liquor to his influence in music and media, everything is now under scrutiny. And for someone who's always prided himself on being in control, this is uncharted territory. But perhaps the most damning aspect of this entire saga is the way it pulls back the curtain on the culture of silence that has long protected powerful figures in entertainment. Diddy isn't the first mogul to face allegations like these, and he likely won't be the last. But the scale of the accusations, combined with the growing body of evidence, makes this case particularly explosive. It's not just about one man's fall from grace. It's about a system that allowed him to rise in the first place. And let's not forget the people who are still standing by him: his family, his friends, his business partners. All of them are now under the spotlight, their loyalty being questioned as the allegations pile up. Are they complicit, or are they victims of the same manipulation that allegedly ensnared so many others? It's a question that doesn't have an easy answer, but one that's becoming increasingly difficult to ignore.
Sean Combs get another shot with Judge Subramanian? Or what will be his likelihood of success in a different court? Because there's currently a pending appeal at the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. So to get into all of this, I want to bring on former federal prosecutor Neema Rahmani, friend of the show. Neema, thanks so much for coming on. First, before we even get into what he can do next, were you surprised?
At the heart of it all is a man who built an empire by controlling the narrative, but now, for the first time, that narrative is slipping out of his grasp. And as the walls close in, the question isn't just whether Diddy can survive this scandal, it's whether the empire he built can withstand the weight of the truth. Because if even half of what's being alleged is true, this isn't just a fall from grace, It's a reckoning. So what happens next? Will the evidence be enough to bring Diddy down, or will his team find a way to spin this into yet another comeback story? And what does this mean for the industry as a whole? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this unfolding saga. You won't want to miss what comes next.